Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Strive Summit podcast. I'm your host, Alex Hanna, and today with me I have the Balkan Architect, Milos. Milos, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, hello, Alex. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. So my name is Milos Temerinski, better known online as the Balkan Architect. So I'm an architect by trade. I finished university in Belgrade, Serbia. So that's Eastern Europe, the Balkan region. That's where the whole Balkan Architect name comes from. So yeah, I finished architecture school there, and during my years of studying, I got interested in Revit and started a small YouTube channel, and it kind of exploded from there. And yeah, so that's that's kind of the background.
Yeah, you say small YouTube channel. I think you're up there with the Revit Kid and a couple other people, but like you're pretty up there. I think I've
Yeah,
definitely
it
referenced your
started
videos before
small.
in the
It
past.
started really small. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk technology. So you are in the forefront of BIM. You're always doing these videos. I see you're doing tutorials now. What are some technologies coming out that you're really excited about to use and like start playing with or have used?
Yeah. So a large part of what I do is, of course, YouTube tutorials, and a big portion of that is working with companies on presenting their software. So during this year, I had a lot of interesting companies reach out, and then we decided to collaborate. And it's usually some kind of Revit based or Revit tangent software, and I'm really excited about that, kind of adding capabilities to the whole Revit platform. So point clouds is something that I'm really excited about, seeing how they can be utilized, kind of quickly scanning objects, and then being able to use that in Revit, and hopefully being able to use it quickly without crashing your computer all the time. So that's one technology that I'm really interested in. Also, AI, of course, has been a big topic in the past few years. For me personally, it's really difficult to see kind of through the noise and see what's kind of hype and what's the thing that's going to stay there in the long run. I think there is a lot of hype companies, people kind of trying to get on the AI train without having anything substantial in the background. So just trying to see through the noise where's the actual implementation and where it can actually mean something. I think, especially in the BIM world, for example, for me, it's really fun using like ChatGPT to brainstorm ideas for videos or how I can write a good introduction to the video. But when it comes to the BIM world and where precision is really important, like the errors that AI can make for my video, they're not a problem. If it happens in the construction industry, it can be a huge problem. So that's something that I'm really interested in. How can we actually get AI that's reliable? So that's kind of a big thing. So that and also I think another thing is Autodesk Forma. It's something that I've started a little bit playing around with it. I've made a couple of videos that have performed really well, so there's definitely an audience for that. I see they're rolling out new capabilities often, and I see it's kind of a lot of chatter in the industry, like it's the next Revit that's going to replace Revit. I still don't see that kind of bridging the gap between Forma and Revit at this time, but yeah, I'm excited about new technology, especially web browser based, not being kind of tied down to a very powerful desktop machine. It sounds really good, but I would like to see it and kind of get to the Revit level of capabilities uh, from there. So yeah, those are kind of
Yeah,
the things that are currently on my mind.
that's awesome. Yeah, so backing up a little bit to the
Mhm,
AI. So I've definitely seen a lot of generative design tools come
mhm.
out, and that was before AI. And now I'm seeing those same tools say AI.
Yeah,
And yeah, and so there's one that I've used before. It's called Hypar. Have you heard of Hypar?
I haven't.
So Hypar, I think it's you got to pay for it now, but at some point it was like a free demo. It was a text to building. So you can say, I want a H-shaped building with parking on the first 5 floors, then commercial on the next 5, and residential on the next 3. And then you can also do floor plan layouts and put a whole like floor plan out there and say, I want corner offices and windows, and I want this much square space to be for bathrooms and residential, and it would generate a design for you. And I'm wondering if that is really AI or generative design. But it's really interesting because it's the only place I've seen AI really benefit in BIM is on the introductory architectural building side. Like I haven't seen AI been introduced into like the actual modeling portion or fabrication portion. A lot of it is all data driven. So I'm curious, like you are, to see where AI comes from. And as far as Forma goes, I've heard a couple tools that are supposedly Revit replacements. I think right now Revit's definitely the 900-pound gorilla in the room. But there's definitely like there's definitely some softwares out there. I've talked to a lot of people from Canada and more like UK, and they talk about Open BIM a lot and Blender BIM and these free softwares. I've never used. Have you used Blender BIM before?
I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't used it either, but it's a free software that some guy developed from a VFX software before. So it's really interesting to see how things are going to spread. You know, the US is very much locked in on the Autodesk culture.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other softwares like SketchUp and Tekla and things like that out there. But as a whole, US is very Autodesk based. I don't think I've been on a project yet. Nope, there's one project. 99% of the projects I've been on in my career, we've used Autodesk docs or management of some kind, you know, or Procore, but had Autodesk doc elements. The one time we didn't, I think they were a little stuck in the Stone Ages where we didn't have any kind of file format. It was just everyone uploaded manually every day, and that was awful. 10 out of 10 do not recommend doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I think on the topic of kind of AI and where you can actually use it, I think it's I see a couple of problems that companies need to prove that they can solve before you can say, okay, this is actually viable. The first problem is accuracy. So if it's something where I do actually need a correct result, it cannot really make mistakes. And of course, with AI, the mistakes tend to happen. I know I did a video where I tried to learn Revit from ChatGPT, and it was good at some things, but it did make some mistakes where it just skips a step or it makes some weird step in between. And if this is part of your process, it can mess things up really significantly. So that's one thing. Another thing is, especially with this idea where you're using it in the design phase, just to test things out. I did Vera's AI for rendering, and I think it's really powerful. I think there's just a question of at what point are you just kind of making endless results and just searching through them just to see what the result is, and where it makes more sense just to go from scratch and kind of rely on yourself.
Yeah, I mean, so I use AI every day for my business, but I use it for marketing purposes, right? So I send out a video every Monday called BIM Tips. And I use AI for that, but I've trained, I pay for it. So I've trained one specifically on BIM VDC and softwares in that space. And I mean, all softwares. So I'm like, I need you to give me a BIM tip. And then now it's starting to repeat itself. So like, okay, give me a VDC tip for a technical user, right? And so, okay, now it's giving me more software based. And so the BIM tips I'm sending out, I mean, they're great. It's a lot of like, don't be afraid, stand out, speak up, do the extra mile, use different softwares, use one CDE, you know, like kind of all general good knowledge that people should know that's never implemented. So, I mean, I use AI for a lot of that, but I don't use AI particularly for any kind of modeling, sourcing, or anything like that.
Yeah.
Point clouds. You mentioned you're excited about point clouds. Have you used them before?
So yeah, I've tested a few tools for point clouds and just how they can be implemented in Revit in a kind of a more natural way, and how
Mhm.
you can generate geometry from them. So I think that's a really big thing. I don't have too much experience, but yeah, it's something that I find really exciting. I think it's just a matter of technology making it a bit more accessible. I think you need at this time it's either a small point cloud or it needs to be a really powerful machine to be able to get the full use out of it.
Yeah, the powerful machine is definitely needed. I've had my laptop for like 5, 6 years, and it's still got like a 2060 in it, and it's running on like an i7 ninth gen, and we're on like 14 right now.
Yeah.
So it's like just now starting to be like, maybe you should upgrade your computer, or like there's like a pop up that says up like your computing power is not enough or something like that. I've had that pop up 3 times this year, and now I'm like, well, maybe I should get a new computer. But it's tough because a lot of these softwares, because they make Revit machines, or they make AutoCAD machines, or like visual effects machines. But in reality, big users, I would say like yourself, don't just use Revit.
Yeah.
Don't just use it. So it's like, what machine do you lean towards? Do you lean towards the NVIDIA GTX series, or the what are the P4000s that are great for CAD? And what's the core member? Do you have double cores? I don't know how much you know about the computer technical side, but I built computers for a couple. Well, for the company I was in, we mocked them and they got built. And then I bought this laptop. And now I'm just like, I don't know where to go from here. Just all this software out there that's using so much different parts of your computer. It's difficult to pick one machine and say this is just Revit, because it's never going to just do that.
Yeah, that's true. I think just because we have that constant need for more powerful machines, it gets really difficult at the point. I know I've talked to a few companies that are doing freelancing, just large freelancing companies, and then when they need to get machines for their software needs, and then they're talking to different companies. Okay, so if they're using Revit, they're using this software, other software, and it gets to a point where you need to spend like some ridiculous amount of money on a machine that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be outdated in 5 years, or you have to then start upgrading components, and it just becomes this huge deal. And they started thinking, okay, so we need to scale back on what's the most kind of expensive software in terms of computing power. Okay, so can we let that go? Can we find an alternative? So just being able to do more with what you have is
Mm-hmm.
really important. So I think with software companies, the ones that can offer that, they're definitely going to be they're going to have that competitive advantage.
So, Milos, I want to talk about your journey. I want to talk about
Okay,
how you became the Balkan Architect.
of course.
So, I want to hear from whatever grade you were in university or school or whatever, to your now famous YouTuber.
Yeah, definitely. So uh, I would start that journey at university. So I was started the Belgrade University, started learning about architecture. And one thing that they've realized very early on is that people who knew software had a great advantage over other students, just in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what they can do for all of our school tasks. So that kind of became my priority to start learning software, and just so I can do more and become more capable. Also, something else that kind of pushed me in that direction is we had it was the 2008 crisis. Nothing was really being built after that for a very long time. So when I was at school, all of the professors, all the teaching assistants, they were kind of in this very scary economy mindset. So they were telling us that there are no jobs out there, and it's really difficult to get a job. You need experience. You need to work for free forever, and then maybe you can get a job or something like that. So kind of my thing was, okay, if I learn software, perhaps I can get that advantage over other people, and then perhaps I can get a good job after school. So that's also something that pushed me into learning more about software. So at first, I just wanted to learn everything. So I was learning 3ds Max, I was learning CAD, kind of some advanced things that I could find. I learned about Revit, so I tried that, and I realized that's probably the best thing that I should learn, especially for floor plan layouts. Just if you don't know anything in Revit, you can always do floor plans. It's really simple just to move things around, and I found that to be a very powerful design tool. So kind of went from there, and as I was learning, I've seen a few courses online and a few YouTube tutorials, and I thought that was really great how people can teach you through video, because I kind of grew up with YouTube, so my attention span is quite short compared to the older generations. I know now with the TikTok generation, it's probably even worse.
Even shorter, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, like, video was the way to learn something and the way to figure things out. And at the time, there weren't really that many channels on YouTube, and I don't think anybody was doing kind of the YouTubers approach to Revit. So I was watching a lot of YouTubers, and we all know, like, now what a kind of a generic YouTube video looks like. And I tried to bring that to Revit. So for example, nobody really used interesting thumbnails. So I tried to find, okay, so I can use an interesting thumbnail with an actual picture of a building. I will teach you how to do this in Revit. And that kind of exploded from there. I tried doing something that nobody was really doing at the time, was just taking interesting projects and showing how this form can be created in Revit. So I did a lot of that. A lot of tutorials also. At the time, YouTube was pushing, they wanted people to upload every day. The idea was, you upload every day, people want to look at you, they go to YouTube every day, and then YouTube makes money. So they were really pushing channels that did that. So I was like, okay, so for, I think it was 2018, I did daily uploads whole year. I didn't miss a day. So
Oh my
that was
goodness.
yeah, that was really difficult. And I was also studying, going to school full time, and I was doing projects on the side. So I even had days where I would, like, wake up. Okay, so I have, I don't know, like, till noon to figure out the video, record it, schedule it. Then I need to go to university and do my other stuff. So that really blew up the channel. So I was still at university, channel was doing great, started making money from it, and then I realized, okay, so this is a career that I can actually go into. I can pursue this perhaps full time. So after that, another big thing for me, as in a business sense, was the Patreon. People were always asking me where they can find my files, and I couldn't figure out a good way to host files online. And somebody commented, like, man, just create a Patreon. I would be happy to pay for just the files from your videos. And never really thought about that. So I created a Patreon. That was doing very well just for files. And then I moved into creating some exclusive content. So some mini courses, like 1 hour Revit courses. And then I realized, okay, I need a beginner course because I don't have it. People are asking me for that. And then I started the website balkanarchitect.com and started doing more kind of longer courses, from like 3 hours up to, I have like 22-hour beginner course right now that's there. So really trying to develop the best way to kind of teach pretty much everything that there is to know about Revit. Of course, there's so much more to say always, but yeah, that's kind of where it went from there. And I was doing that kind of as a one-man show for a very long time, till about 2 years ago, I think. I always liked that idea of internet or laptop lifestyle, I think it was called. Like you're sitting in a beach, you're doing your kind of laptop work thing, you're in
Yeah.
Bahamas, Bali, whatever, and you're enjoying life. And I really thought that's that's what they wanted. And never really got to Bali, but yeah, I was at home kind of working as a one-man show, and it was fun. But I realized to get it to do something bigger, I really need to delegate and find people that can help me. I can't learn and do everything at once. So and then I started hiring people, started a company. Now we are up to, it's me plus 3 employees. So now we have a kind of a Revit lead researcher plus consulting services person. We have a video editor and we have a marketing person that we recently hired. So it's growing at this time. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I'm really kind of at a crossroads where I'm trying to figure out, okay, what should my position be? Should I be the one doing research, or should I only record, or should I even get somebody else to record and just try to manage everything and try to get everything to another level? So I guess I can say I'm struggling a little bit with that, just to figure out my place in this whole thing that I've built.
Mhm.
So that's where I'm at right now, because I'm realizing that there's so much to know in this industry, and I can't really learn everything for the purposes of teaching it. So it's really important to get people that have actual real world experience and be able to share that. Just try to facilitate it in a way that's it's most productive, easiest to learn, and just have it kind of the best type of learning content available for Revit. So yeah, that's
That's
that's kind of the whole
that's
journey.
incredible. Okay, so let's go back.
Mhm.
What made you want to go to architecture at university?
Okay, so that's interesting. So my father was or still is an architect, and he's been doing. He's done a lot of how do you call that? I don't know the English word. It's like heritage architecture. So it's basically
Oh,
rebuilding
historical preservation.
historical buildings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So reconstruction, a lot of monasteries. He's actually worked on a like a fourth castle and museums, things like that. So he does that. Now he's kind of pivoted more into public spaces, paving, things like that. So I was always exposed to architecture from a very early age. However, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go into aviation. I was into remote control planes in high school and wanted to do that. So I wasn't really doing good in, or sorry, in so that's preschool, middle school. Here in Serbia, we have preschool and middle school is one thing, and then high school is another thing. I know there in America, I think it's a bit different.
I always love hearing the differences of education in different places because of the sheer fact of, like, I just talked to recently some guy. He was from Chile and he was an architect in
Mhm.
Chile. And he did his degrees and everything. And he went to Canada, and none of it transferred, so he had to get an architecture degree again. And he was
Oh,
telling me architecture is kind of a general thing in Chile, but in the U.S., architecture is a clear path of what you're doing,
yeah.
right? Whether it's landscape or building. So I love hearing the different education systems,
Mhm.
because if I outsource anywhere and I outsource to Belgrade for some reason, and they tell me they have a degree in architecture, as a U.S. client, I don't know what the degree of architecture looks like in
Yeah.
Belgrade compared to the U.S. But a lot of people just assume it's the same. So
Yeah,
tell me,
yeah.
tell me. I want to hear it all.
Yeah, it's completely different. Yeah. Yeah, we have kind of the preschool, middle school is together, and yeah, I think it was middle school. I was into these remote control planes. I wasn't doing very well in terms of grades, so I was very limited in which high school I can apply to. And we have these. I don't know if you have that in America. It's like trades high school, so it's
Mm-hmm.
a high school that's kind of specific to a specific trade or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to go into the like for planes or aviation high school. However, I thought that would be being a pilot or designing a plane, but it was really catered towards becoming a mechanic or something like that, like a technician working at an airport. So when I realized that, didn't like that, I really liked the process of designing and building my own planes. So I thought, okay, so that's kind of architecture-ish. So there I would at least learn to draw, learn to create these designs. And also my father is an architect, so I always found that his work interesting. So I decided to go with that. So I applied to the architecture high school. So that kind of got me there. And slowly kind of I lost interest in the aviation side of things and gained interest in architecture. So the logical next step was to go to the university to become an architect.
So when I was going to school, I wanted to be an automotive designer. So I
Oh,
was design, but I was nowhere near construction. I was all manufacturing. And
yeah.
I'm like, yep, I hate construction. And my reason was I hated fractions. That was, for some reason in my head, I was like, don't want to deal with fractions. I don't want to touch construction.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of design and manufacturing in the beginning. And then, excuse me. And then I got into a modular facility. And it was like the perfect blend of here's this manufacturing plant, right? And here's now you got to deal with fractions, but here's the construction side. And then that's kind of where I think I found my passion is construction, leadership, management, and then also coming through and wanting to educate. So a big thing that I like to do is train and educate. That's part of what my job was at my last job. Is what I do now is bring people up to speed on what Revit can do for them. There's a lot of people out there that do Revit, they call it BIM, and they're doing just fine, but they don't know that next level that can take them to prefabrication or different types of construction. So I love teaching, and even like the little things, like some people use Evolve as a plugin, and in their I think it's like an element filter. Have you used Evolve before?
I think I've tested it. I don't use it kind of in my day-to-day, but yeah.
Well, in the element filter, you can use hotkeys to quickly turn things on and off for an element filter. So if I have a link and I don't want to show it, I can use a hotkey, right? But
Yeah.
then I show them, well, if you're right-handed, make your hotkeys on your left hand and make them the opposite. So if you do QW, WQ, then it's on off, right? And people are
Okay.
like just mind blown by this like little tiny bit of efficiency. I had a kid when I was working at the factory, he brought in his own keyboard. It was a gaming keyboard. And he had all those buttons, you can customize.
Oh yeah.
Well, he was technically writing script with shortcuts. So he'd make that button make a string of shortcuts and he'd hit it and it would do the whole command. I'm like, look, you need to
Okay,
show
that's
everyone
cool.
this. I'm buying everyone keyboards, because it's things like that you don't realize you can add these external kind of ideas to software and just change the way you're efficient at it. I love teaching efficiency, which I think if you're in Revit, period, you got to love efficiency because there's always a better way to do something. And every year something new tool comes out to help you. I think it's incredible. What keeps you going?
Yeah, so it's just kind of continuing on that idea is that wow factor that you get, and that's like, oh my God, I can do this. So that's something that you get a lot of that when you start learning a software, and you're just amazed at what the possibilities are. So I really like that feeling, and I try to bring it to other people through my videos. So that's what I'm interested in. And for kind of general, kind of my approach is that I want to figure out the best way to teach different topics, and I still feel like I'm very far from that. Like when I look at my videos from 5 years ago, I cringe, and I feel they're terrible. And there's this thing on YouTube where the older video that has more views is always going to be recommended more. So I would
Mm-hmm.
see an old video of mine that I think it's horrible and it can be done so much better now with my current skills and knowledge. And then I do a new video, but that video doesn't get any views because it's a new video, and compared to the old one, it can't really break through. So I'm competing with my own content, basically. So that's kind of annoying, but also fun. So yeah, I just want to figure out the best way to teach. I was really annoyed at what university looked like. It was a lot of standing in hallways for hours so you can see the teaching assistant so they can give you like 3 comments, and then you get to the exam, and then the professor says that it looks terrible what you did according to the teaching assistant's comments. And it was this whole thing where you're really confused, and you feel constantly like your time is not being valued and it's being wasted for not really gaining any knowledge. You do learn something, but when I look back and see, okay, so I've spent 5 years and I've learned very little in that time. It's really bothering me. So what I'm trying to do is just make education more efficient. I think just as we have efficiency in Revit, I'm always looking at how can I explain this in a shorter way. How can I make it better? What's the best way to learn? And also just figuring out different tiers of learning. We have on my website with the courses I do, my idea is you have the kind of the basic tier, you're still getting into that. You need somebody to kind of guide you through the entire process. But then you have somebody like me that already knows a lot. However, I either can't remember some specific sequence of things or something like that. I want to find kind of a quick way that I can recall that information without having to go through a 3-page document or through a 15-minute video. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you just hit a hot button for me right there. Okay. So I talk about standards in companies for Revit or their BIM department. And talk about how back in the day when you were a drafter and you got hired to do AutoCAD, you got a thick book. And then there was every line type and line style for everything you need to know about AutoCAD. Those don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
For some reason, they're scrubbed from current design times or Revit. So I tell her, but I'm like, write your Revit process down. Because as soon as you bring a new person on, they need something to reference. They need an index. And if you think you can remember everything about Revit, you're absolutely crazy. You've heard it here today. The Balkan Architect does not remember everything about Revit. Okay.
Yeah, I watch my old videos all the time.
Perfect. Okay. Everyone listening, write down your processes. I love that. So I have a question for you. What was your aha moment? What was the moment where you were like, I'm going to do this? Whether it was, I want to hear your Revit moment when you learned about Revit and you thought it was incredible and you're like, I'm going to do this forever. And I want to hear your YouTube moment where you realized, okay, I'm going to do this on YouTube now.
Yeah, definitely. So in Revit, I think it was detailing when I figured out that you can actually do detailing in Revit. When I started learning it, I was pretty much the only one at my university that was working or kind of finishing projects in Revit, or not even finished. But I mean, it's those university projects. You don't really get any level of detail there, at least at our university, especially in the first couple of years. So when I would use Revit, other kind of teaching assistants mostly would say like, "Oh, cool, you're using Revit. Like, we tried that at our company, but you have to do details in AutoCAD, so it doesn't make sense. Why would you use Revit then in the first place when you have to finish the project in AutoCAD?" And I kind of took that as gospel, and then I figured out, okay, so I can actually do detailing in Revit, and that was like a big breakthrough moment. And I realized, okay, I can pretty much finish everything in Revit. When you realize that you can do some detailing, you can do some 2D views. It's not end of the world if you don't make everything in 3D. Sometimes, a lot of times, it doesn't make sense to do things in 3D, so you can have a like 3% more accurate calculation on something that you already know that they're going to order like 50% more than they need. So what's the point, or something like that. So yeah, I think that was a big moment for Revit. And for YouTube, I think it was when I hit like 10,000 subscribers, 20,000 subscribers, because it really took off. I was doing it for about a year, and I would do perhaps a few videos a month, and I really, I would do, like, I would sit down, I would record 2 videos, and I would release them immediately, both of them, and then I would be gone for a month. And so I did it like that. And then when I started with the daily uploads, it really grew. It took about 2-3 months to actually start growing. And when that revenue from the YouTube ads started coming in, and it was actually okay at that time, even though everybody was complaining in
Mm-hmm.
2018 how the ad rates are terrible, and you look at them now and it's it's nowhere near that. But yeah, when I started making money from that, I realized, okay, so perhaps I don't have to be like a corporate slave in a company. I perhaps I can do this. And a big benefit for me was I was living in Serbia. I'm still living in Serbia. So the cost of living at that time, especially, was a lot lower. Now, especially with the rent and everything, that kind of shot through the roof. But
Mm-hmm.
I could actually live from just kind of the YouTube revenue at the time. So that was kind of a big thing. And I always had a kind of dream in the back of my mind, like I wanted to do something with YouTube, just never knew what. And when I realized, okay, this is actually viable, I was so excited about that.
That's really interesting. I mean, I'm about to hit 100, and I'm
Mhm,
really excited about that. But I just have my podcast on there right now.
mhm.
But yeah, I mean, YouTube is a great outlet, especially for people wanting to learn. And I mean, again, I've used your videos in the past a bunch of times. Um, I know I've recommended your videos to other people as well, and you put great content out there. And you're actually, I would say, um, when it comes to online content about Revit and tutorials, you see a lot of tutorials out there that are not native speaking US based
Mhm.
people, right? Your tutorials are very engaging and fascinating. And I love
Yeah.
that about what you're doing. Because not only is it great for Revit content to learn, but it's for anyone to go out there and learn Revit in general. You put
Yeah.
the content out there where you could start at bare minimum and be at the level, I mean, you're at today, basically. If you spend enough time on YouTube and watch all your videos, you'd be a master at it. So, thank you for the for building that community. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um,
I think, yeah, so just to mention, for the kind of the podcast idea, I think it's really powerful to be able to hear these full kind of stories of people. Especially just to hear kind of the background of some person. You see somebody that's doing whatever job or position, and it just doesn't look real how you can go from wherever you are to that point. But when you hear a
mhm,
story, you realize that it's they didn't start there, and it wasn't like a clear journey, and it always has its ups and downs. And the fun thing is, at least in my experience, I tend to forget like the downsides. Like I hear a lot of like business people or whatever, they talk about, okay, so I had this downside here, okay, I lost money there, this failed business, that failed business, this guy kind of ripped me off, whatever. When I look at, and I always thought like, okay, I don't have that. I was extremely lucky. And then when I try to rewind, like, okay, I had all of that. Like I had failed
yep,
ideas, failed businesses. I have a failed YouTube channel. I had a lot of failures along the way, but you tend to forget those, and that's kind of the great part about having a podcast like this in our industry, where you can hear, okay, you can actually get to that. You just need time, basically.
exactly. And gumption and gusto.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people, let's say, like I've heard a lot of people in the industry from just talking in the podcast is from what I learned is you got to have want,
Hmm.
a lot of want to be. There's definitely people that are just busy bees, and that's what they want to do. And there's definitely people in leadership, people like yourself, that just want to be out there and do things right and push forward. And you definitely see the outcome of pushing forward. This industry is so young. You know, like, to me, I got in this industry in 2018. From what I understand, 2015 is when things started to kick up a little bit with a lot of different things, when drafting started to transition into BIM and VDC. Because I went to school for drafting technologies, right? And I learned 3ds Max and Maya and Blender and Revit and AutoCAD and 3D AutoCAD, all these different softwares. And all it was an introduction to tools. And by the way, I was in Revit 2013, absolutely hated it, never wanted to touch it the rest of my life. Did a project on it that was part of what we had to do, was like render a scene. Worst time of my life, worst class, never wanted to touch it. And now I'm out here, you know, using Revit every day for fabrication and production. And I could, it's just incredible the technology has come this way. I just talked to someone else. They were like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, oh, I'm in BIM and VDC. And they say, what is that? So now I ask the question, what do you tell your parents you do for a living?
Yeah, so that's kind of a difficult one for me. I really don't know how to answer that, especially at this time. Like, I knew, I would say I'm an architect when as I just finished school, because I was still working on kind of some projects. I did some competitions, things like that. So I kind of felt like an architect. Then YouTube became this major part of my life. So then I felt like, okay, so I'm a YouTuber educator. And then I got to this point where I don't know really what I do. Like, majority of my time right now is just management and just business stuff. So I say to people, like, I spend very little time in Revit. It's mostly emails and calls and things like that. So it feels weird. I don't. I'm not really sure, like, how to process that just for myself. How I would say that. So right now I say I run an educational or e-learning business in the architecture sphere or software. So that's what I what I say that I do, but because it's really weird.
I mean, I tell people that I'm in digital construction, and then they look at me funny. I tell them I'm a drafter, and they go, "Oh," and then they walk away. And it's difficult because it's new. BIM VDC is a new term, relatively new. If I say drafter, people understand that, okay, you make blueprints, but like, the industry is so not making blueprints anymore. There's so many specialties. Like, even within Revit, since we're talking about Revit, within Revit alone, there's people that specialize in interior design or architecture or structure or electrical or plumbing or mechanical, right? And that's all they know, and they're really good at it. And so, what do they tell people they do for a living? Oh, I'm a digital plumber. You know, like,
Yeah.
I'm so curious. And comment below if you know. But if you're in this industry, what do you tell your parents you do for a living? I think it's the greatest question to, like, all of us come out with a term that we can use that everyone understands. It's an interesting concept. I think I've told my parents that I do. Well, my dad, he was a mechanical contractor, HVAC, right? And I explained to him like 3 or 4 times, and then every time he calls me, he'll say something, and I was like, "Don't you know what I do for a living?" He goes, "No, I still don't understand." I'm like, how do you not understand? Like, a 3D model, it's a different concept, different times.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to hear.
Yeah. One thing I would add there is I realized how powerful it is when you combine two interests, two specialties, or something like that. So, for example, for me, that was I learned Revit. I got very decent at Revit, and that could only get me so far, especially in Serbia, where Revit is just kind of being developed right now, and still nobody really knows what they're doing, and it's still a very messy field. So that could have only gotten me so far. And then on the other side, I have YouTube, which I was always passionate about, and then I combined those two, and now I'm a Revit YouTuber or YouTube Revitor, however you would call that. And then just by combining things, you become so much more powerful in what you can do. And especially with BIM, I think the whole industry is becoming so much more complicated. You really can't be like just like an architect. I think when somebody tells me like they're an architect, like, okay, but what do you do? Okay, so you're an architect, but do you do like,
Exactly.
yeah, do you do
Yeah.
hospitals? Do you do industrial buildings? And I remember still to this day, I think it's so weird right now when I think about it. They taught us, it was, I think it's like first year of architecture school. They were like, okay, so architects, they need to know everything about everything, because one day you would be designing a hospital, the next day it's a villa, the next day it's a factory. And now when I think about it, like, nobody does that. Like, you're either you have to work like 5 years to be able to just on factories to be able to understand them fully, so you can do a factory design or hospitals or something. Like, you can't really jump from one project to the other. I mean, you can, but most successful people that they've seen so far in the industry, they've always been focused on one thing and specialized for that, and that's where they can become so powerful.
Yeah, I think a great translation is specialized drafter, right?
Yeah.
If and it's not just drafting anymore. It's scanning, it's point clouds, it's LiDAR, it's AI, it's all this web development. Now developers are technically BIM VDC because they do BIM VDC development or
Hmm.
softwares like SketchUp and Revit. And so it's just such a big industry that no one knows about. It's so hidden from
Yeah.
sight. Like it's you go to school for architecture or engineering, and then all these people who don't actually get licensed fall into this industry.
Yeah.
Everyone who has done this has fallen into BIM. No one has ever sought out to go, I'm going to go be a BIM person. No one has
Yeah.
ever thought that. So I love the growth that's happening right now. And I think it's only going to get better and more clear as we go forward. Or, I mean, I guess it can get real confusing real quick because there's a lot of technology coming out. There's people that just do, like company I work for, all we did was software, but we did prefab software. So I can take a construction model in Revit and send it to a machine or factory equipment to build it.
Mm.
There's no middleman. There's no guy typing in
Yeah.
numbers, chopping a saw. It's just from one to another. And that's BIM and VDC. What do you call that? And so it's so interesting. There's these definitely and it's a fulfilling industry. Like a lot of it is we play video games all day. We're
Yeah.
all just a bunch of nerds who loved games growing up, or Sims, or SimCity, or something like that. And it's all we do all day is we play games. Okay, and I don't think people quite understand that yet. When I tell them, like, yeah, have you ever played The Sims? I do that for adults. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically that's what I do. It's just, I love it. It's amazing. Milos, I have to say thank you because I did call you out on LinkedIn to come join me for the podcast. And I wasn't sure how you'd respond because if anyone knows, Milos and I have never met. And I've called him out publicly. I was like, I want you on the podcast. And then he messaged me saying, I'd love to do it. So thank you for not being a
Yeah,
dick.
of course.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I really like conversations with people in the industry. I think it's really fun. And I just wanted to say on the topic, as you said, like the industry is so complicated, and perhaps it's going to become clearer or more complicated. I really feel like the path was okay. So we had all of these drafters, and then the new technology came about, and everybody had this idea. So you had this BIM, and it's like 3D BIM, 4D, 5D, 6D, and it's all going to have this form, and everybody understands that. And in reality, it's still a big mess, and I see people just try to figure it out on their own project. How can we utilize technology to make it work? So I see it as we're still figuring it out, and there's so much more that we can figure out, and uh, that's just basically creativity in this space. I think a lot of people are turned away from Revit or the BIM space just because they feel, especially if they're architects, because I know a lot of architects, they feel like it's taking away from their creativity, that they're not designing pretty buildings, they're just doing software stuff. But
Mhm.
when you get into it just a little bit, you see how creative you really need to be to find solutions to these complex problems and try to make everything simple and easy. So yeah, it's a really promising space.
Well, Milos, thank you for coming on. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for
If you
having me
have
on.
no problem. Any last words for our viewers? How they can contact you, listen to your stuff, YouTube channel?
Yeah, so they can always contact me, especially on LinkedIn. It's a new network, so I'm active there. It's the only one I have installed on my phone. All of the others
That's
are
good.
drowned in messages, so it's really difficult to get through everything. But yeah, definitely reach out, and yeah, I'm really excited about new possibilities and going forward from here. And thank you so much for having me on. I haven't done a lot of these podcast style collaborations, and it's really fun. I really like talking to people.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to have you stick around for just a minute.
Mhm.
If you guys like listening to this, you enjoy the podcast, please feel free to like, subscribe, follow YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, all the social medias. Pretty sure I'm on all of them. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you.